what inspired you to fly from coast to coast in the United States during a global pandemic?
Well, that's a good question. I guess ultimately it came down to the fact that I knew for the month of May I was not going to reopen my practice, and I was just going to lock down with everybody else. And the idea of not being able to work, not being able to travel for pleasure, and not being able to spend time with my parents just seemed like a phenomenal waste of everything. So I thought long and hard about whether or not it was crazy to fly to California during a global pandemic. And I sort of consulted with my brother, and I was like, is this insane? Because I just feel like I'm wasting time. I'm never going to have a month where I can just spend time with my parents and just, do nothing and make it quality time.
Did the airlines tell you what to do before you took your flight?
No, the airlines at that point when I flew had not even mandated masks by all passengers. So that happened, I believe, about 2 or 3 days after I took my outbound flight. By the time I returned, obviously, they were mandating that all passengers wear a mask or face coverings.
What was it like at the airport when you arrived in New York City?
So I arrived at JFK and it was empty. I mean, there was no traffic. I got out on the sidewalk and there were no other passengers there. It was completely deserted, and I entered into the terminal gates and it was just the entire area was empty. I saw maybe 2 other passengers roaming around. It was eerie. It was very eerie just to see it that deserted. And this was on a Friday afternoon at like 5.
Wow, which is for JFK is just nuts. I mean, that's usually one of the busiest times of the week. So then you get to the gate. Were there any procedures before you got on the airplane?
Nothing unusual. I would say it was all, well, I was flying with a rabbit. So that was an added procedure. But beyond that, no. There were honestly no extra real announcements either. We just hung out at the boarding gate like you would normally. They may have announced a few things, just talking about their extra sanitation processes, but beyond that, it was pretty standard.
And no temperature check or anything before you got on board?
No. And at that point, like I said, mandatory masking wasn't even happening yet. So anybody could have just gone on wearing whatever they wanted or nothing.
What did you do to keep yourself safe while you were on board?
I wore a gas mask and that was it. I actually didn't bother wiping down any of the surfaces. If you really dig deep into the research, it's just not a real concern. It's not a big source of transmission. Really, the primary transmission is aerosols and inhaling droplets. So with the gas mask, it is apparently 99.97% effective against any particles, and the N95 is 95% more effective against it. So feeling like I was in this gas mask, which was significantly more effective than N95, I kind of felt like, okay, as long as I just wear this and don't take it off, I should be fine.
So on board, were there a lot of passengers? And what were other people wearing? How were other people protecting themselves?
I would say other passengers were mostly masked. I think they were probably all masked. Middle seats were blocked out, so no passengers were seated in middle seats. That said, I would say of the remaining windows and aisles, probably 60% of them were booked, 70% of them, somewhere between 60 and 70% were booked. I didn't have anybody sitting actually in my row on the aisle seat, but I did have people directly in front and directly behind me in the window seats, which is not 6 feet of distance, obviously. I would say other people seemed to wipe down their tray or their seats and things like that. But beyond just mask usage and then some people wiping down things, it felt pretty normal.
What about food service? Were they serving food? Was anybody eating on the plane?
There were people eating on the plane. They did serve snacks. They served drinks and like little small packets of snack packs. Some people had brought food, and obviously when they were eating, they would take down their mask and eat. But by and large, people were very compliant. They wore the masks when they weren't eating or drinking.
Did you eat any food when you were on the plane?
I didn't. I didn't eat and I didn't drink. I kept the mask sealed to my face.
Good for you. Now, one of the other things I've heard is that one of the spots of transmission is the restroom. I don't know if you feel comfortable asking this. Did you use the restroom while you were on the plane? Is that something you felt comfortable doing?
I would say that having gas mask on did give me a heightened sense of security. I had sort of thought it through and talked it over with my brother and thinking like, what if I can't wear this gas mask for 6.5 hours? What do I do? And we had thought, well, maybe you can go into the restroom, close the toilet lid, flush like 1,000,000 times because it's all suction. So if you just keep like pulling that air down, then you've cleared the air in the restroom. You know, I don't know. I thought about it. I was just like, I wasn't actually that concerned. I went, used the restroom, closed the lid, flushed the toilet, washed my hands. Did think about momentarily taking the mask off, like flushing maybe 10 times and then taking off the mask just to relax my face a little. And then I just said, it's not worth it for 5 minutes of comfort. There's no point.
So once you arrived in San Francisco and you were with your parents, did you isolate or do anything to keep your parents safe?
I did. That was sort of part of the plan that I had discussed with my parents in pretty deep detail beforehand. And I said, okay, if I go, these are going to be the rules. When I arrive, I had like a whole protocol where I would change my clothes the minute I got to the airport. My dad was going to pick me up in the car. He was going to sit in the front seat. I was going to sit in the back. We'd keep the windows down. We'd both wear N95s and drive home from the airport that way. And then once I got home, the way my parents' house is set up is the kids' bedroom is on one side of the house, and then the rest of the house is like the normal house. And I just stayed like in the kids' side, and there's a long hallway separating that end or that side of the house. So if I wanted to go into the backyard, I would just go down the hall and go out the garage door and then out into the backyard. So I did that for 12 days hard, and then by like the 13th day I got a little sloppy. I was like hanging out more, I was sneaking into the kitchen. I was like, oh, 2 days more to go. By then I think I'm like at 98% clearance in terms of safety.
And how long were you at home with your parents for?
Exactly 30 days actually. It was probably like it was a true legit 12-day quarantine. And then, I had the rest of the time just to kind of interact with them more normally. It was really nice, but it's not like we did anything exciting. We just kind of hung out, cooked, talked, ate,
And actually, in the time of coronavirus, that's what most of us want to do more than anything else, is just see family members in person and do the normal things that we've always done.
Right. Isn't that funny? It's like, it really simplifies things. It crystallizes what's important, who's important, and, all this sort of extra stuff fades away, and you realize, like, now that we're back to semi-normal, we're sort of trying to reopen, I'm like, what did I used to do? I don't even know. It all seems a little frivolous,
Absolutely. Now that they've stopped blocking out the middle seats on many flights, would you do this again?
I've thought about this because I don't like the idea of just not being able to fly. And I did buy another type of P100 mask, which also has the same effectiveness. It's essentially the same as the gas mask. And it's just a lower profile mask. It kind of cups like this instead of your entire face, like an astronaut helmet. And so I bought that, and I feel like I would fly wearing that. Yeah.
All in all, like, how would you rate this whole travel experience and kind of like your thoughts about the future of flying during this global pandemic?
I think it's really tricky in terms of where the balance lies. I think that a lot of people really don't take the necessary precautions to do it safely. And I think it can be done safely, frankly. I was very nervous before my flights, but it actually had less to do with COVID concerns than just the discomfort of wearing a gas mask and knowing that I wasn't going to eat or drink and that I was traveling with an animal, those types of things. But in terms of the future of flying, again, I don't actually think airplanes are that terrible to be in. They have these high-grade, high-power HEPA filters running. So I think the important thing is protect yourself on the plane, wear PPE, And when you get to your destination, depending on where you're coming from, if you're coming from a hot zone, if you're coming from a hot zone, ideally you wouldn't fly anywhere, you would just stay put. But if you have to fly, or you just really feel the need to fly, then I do think that when you arrive at your destination, you need to try to self-quarantine for a while, at least 10 to 12 days, and you need to get a test. In theory, I think maybe you could get a test 3 to 5 days after arriving, and see how that goes. But again, I think that to really be safe, we need to make sure that tests are more reliable than what they currently are.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us. Again, we've been speaking with Steph Chan, who is currently in New York City. Stay safe.
Thanks.